I will hand over to Sally. The screen's all yours, Sally. And Nick, can you press record? Oh, you are recording.
Okay, well, thank you, Anne. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you, Nick, for hosting. And big thanks as well to the City branch of the Wildlife Trust for giving us this opportunity to talk about what we've been doing on Verges, on Herefordshire Verges, I should say. So, hello to everyone. I'm, as Anne said, Sally Webster, one of the 3 co-founders of Verging on Wild, or VOW as it sometimes gets known. And I have to say, I was pretty awestruck when I saw the number of people who would be joining us this evening. And so big thank you to you for making the effort to be part of the audience. And I do hope that you enjoy the talk. Somewhat disconcertingly, when I push my share screen button, I'll only be talking to a slideshow rather than to an audience. And so please bear with me if I occasionally lose momentum. But obviously that's the nature of Zoom. So we have a lot to be grateful for in terms of the amazing reach that Zoom is now giving us in terms of a much bigger audience than we might previously have had. So I'm just going to fumble around a little bit for a moment to share my screen. And of course, I can't see what I really want anymore. Should be sharing it. Great. So I'm going to get rid of the floating controls. I'm assuming everybody can hear me fine. And I also assume that you can now see my screen.
Can we get full screen or not? We are on full screen. This is all her. There we are. That's all her background.
Okay, so you should see my first slide, Verging on Wild, working for biodiversity. Yeah. Okay. Just, I mean, Anne has started to do it already, but just a very quick outline of our talk. As Anne said, I'll be talking for about 40 minutes, and then I'll be handing over for the last 10 minutes to Suzanne. So I'll be focusing mainly on what we've been doing with Roadside Verge Nature Reserves, RVNRs, bit of a mouthful, and with a little bit on our proposals for changes to verge management in Herefordshire generally, and also talking a little bit about our future aspirations. And then I'll be handing over to Suzanne, who will be focusing on meadow creation, and that will be particularly geared to amenity verges and green spaces, which I know quite a few of you are interested in. Just picking up on this slide, working for, as we say, we're working to improve the biodiversity of Herefordshire's verges. And so, yes, you know, wildflowers is obviously the starting point, but where you have wildflowers, invariably you also have other wildlife, whether that's invertebrates, you know, other wildlife will follow, small mammals, amphibians, birds, etc. So it's very much a holistic look at biodiversity, starting with wildflowers. Oh, I can hear somebody talking there. Yeah. I don't know whether everybody...
Unfortunately, as the technical host, the only option I've got is to mute all, which will also mute Sally. So
okay.
That. So could I please put out a message to everybody? You should be on mute, please, unless we ask you to speak to ask a particular question, a particular point. But could everybody please make sure that they are on mute? Because with this many people, there could be a lot of microphones on and noise being picked up. So everybody on mute, please, apart from Sally. Thank you.
Okay, so here are the 3 of us. Suzanne, myself and Anne. We actually come from very, very different backgrounds, and none of us are qualified ecologists. Suzanne has a biology degree, I suppose she's the closest, but she worked as a homeopath, and you might also know her through the business that she had propagating and selling wildflowers called Plantlife. and now native orchids. Anne has a background in art, housing law, and more recently, in recent years, in organic horticulture. And she manages to propagate some fantastic good for pollinator plants, and often has little stalls in places. I'm a linguist and business researcher, but my particular, I suppose, bond with the natural environment is because I come from a farming background. So we have different backgrounds, but what unites us is our passion for the natural environment, not just for Verges, but also for trees. We're all three parish tree wardens. So a passion for the natural environment and a real concern for declines in biodiversity. So why Verging on Wild? As Anne said at the beginning, we founded our little group in 2018. And it was because we were seeing a decline in wildflowers on our verges. That seemed to be becoming more and more acute. And in my case, particularly, I was aware of a lack of management on a particularly special verge where I'd previously seen management. And all three of us were aware of the National Plantlife Verges campaign, which started back in 2012. So we thought really we could do something similar for Herefordshire's verges. So I suppose it's just worth saying, you know, we're not reinventing the wheel here. There are lots of other counties who are doing similar things, and in many cases they have a lot more roadside verge nature reserves than we do in Herefordshire. So we've got quite a lot to go for, as it were. So in June 2018, we constituted ourselves as an association. Mainly it was because we wanted to be able to set up a bank account. We wanted to be able to raise funds. We felt it gave us more credibility. And at the moment, Suzanne's the chair, Anne's the secretary, and I'm the treasurer. That's all you need, just 3 people in positions to become constituted, to have a constitution and to be an association. So what really are the reasons for this decline that we were seeing in verge diversity? I mean, not just in Herefordshire, obviously, across, you know, nationwide. Excessive soil fertility, encouraging much, you know, the coarser, the thugs, if you like, and the thugs can be, you know, yes, nettles up to a point, although they obviously can be good for wildlife in the right places, but hogweed, even cow parsley and things like that, creeping thistle, etc. Things that are basically going to suppress the more delicate species. Cutting during the flowering season, so really preventing the life cycle of wildflowers, and meaning that no pollination opportunities for pollinators, bees, hoverflies, moths, butterflies, etc. We'd also seen that the arisings are generally being left uncollected. They are cut, but then not collected. And what happens then is that you get a buildup of fertility. It certainly maintains the fertility. And what we're aiming for is less fertile verges. And with that thatch, obviously there's no light getting in to allow the germination of new seedlings. And then linking in perhaps to excessive soil fertility, nitrogen, in particular nitrogen deposition from vehicle exhaust fumes, and also with the use of fertilizers, a lot of arable field runoff. So lots of things coming in to increase that soil fertility, allowing the more vigorous species to dominate and really suppressing the more delicate wildflowers that we would like to be seeing. So our starting point, as I said before, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, is and was the Roadside Verge Nature Reserves, the RVNRs. And when the list we came across actually went right up to 33, but they're quite widely spread across Herefordshire. But already this number had declined because they were originally designated back in the, a lot of them were designated back in the 70s and 80s, I mean some more recently. So these are basically special verges which were designated either because they were floristically rich, or they might have been characteristic, for example, of a hay meadow, or they had some unusual species. In some cases, that criteria, that selection criteria, was quite broad, and so they could also include wildlife sites, for example, a badger set. So what we found, well, just backtracking a moment. So what had happened over a certain number of years was that these sites, the management had been contracted, certainly in more recent years, to the Wildlife Trust, at the time the Nature Trust, and there was a special agreement, an SLA, between Herefordshire Council and the Wildlife Trust to manage these sites. And then the funding must have just evaporated, must have just dried up, and these sites were no longer being managed by anybody. So we set about surveying them in 2018. And already quite a few had been taken off the original lists, either because they had become overgrown, they no longer had their target species. I mean, there would have been a variety of reasons. So we ended up, surveying about, I think it was between 16 and 17. And that just gave us a snapshot. We found some had actually been looked after. Sometimes there were some local people who were looking after it. In one case, a farmer, you know, it did vary, but a lot were beginning to scrub up. And originally, these were the signs that were put in place either end of these roadside verge nature reserves, and the concrete posts, which are painted red on one side and white on the other. And I mean, a lot, by the time we started looking in 2018, sorry, a lot had gone missing. But you know, we came across them in some pretty strange places, often horizontal on the ground. And what's quite nice is that in one case, you can see this recently painted sign. This is one of the original ones. The person, the lady who had originally got this site designated, she took the trouble to paint it all up again and print it. It's not quite what we want, no cutting at all, but I'll go on to that later. We want some management. So ultimately, it obviously would be lovely if we can get some posts, get some permanent posts back in place. But for the moment, we're concentrating more on the management side of things. Yeah, ultimately, it'd be great to have posts that are also have educational value with interpretation boards, etc. So what types of roadside verge nature reserves did we find? What types of verges? I'm going to quickly go through these. We found woodland, woodland edge, open meadow, and single species ones. But starting with woodland, some of you may recognise where Anne and Suzanne are walking. This is actually a shot up in Wigmore Rolls, and we haven't got a huge number of woodland sites. There's one tiny one on Dawston Hill, potentially one in the Olcan Valley, a couple in the one in the Doward, and on the whole, they require very little management because they're being shaded, so there's not much growth, and the fertility is being kept in balance because there's no runoff from agricultural fields. So typical species might be herb. I'm sorry, I haven't got my little. That's it. herb Paris, quite an unusual species. Sanicle, and a helleborine. I think that's broadleaved, but I'll get Suzanne to correct me at the end. Woodland Edge. So here you've got a combination really of some woodland plants and some you'd associate more with more open locations. So mix of meadow flora and woodland flora. You can see some here. We've got some common rock rose, violets. This particular RVNR is near storage. And the management changes slightly because obviously there's more light, more growth. So these sorts of sites would typically have a single cut in the autumn. It can be quite a light one, and the important thing would be to rake up the cuttings, the arisings. One of the new RVNRs, which we could describe as Woodland Edge, is actually on Broadmoor Common, but I'll come to that in a moment when I give you some examples. Here I mentioned more open meadow type verge. Some of you may recognise this one. We've called it Orcid Bank. It's the one that I spotted between Hoffwood and Mordiford. So here this calls for you know, an annual cut, and again, most importantly, that they the cuttings, the arisings, are raked up and collected and removed, so that fertility doesn't increase. And even with though an open meadow site like this, you've still got a hedge at the back, so you're going to have some woodland species. You can see some meadowsweet here, but you're also going to get this particular site is quite calcareous, so you're also going to get wildflowers that you'd associate with really quite poor soils like bee orchid and common century. And then some of the sites have been designated for a single species. This one is green hellebore. So this photo was taken in March. And so during the summer months, you'd only see the foliage. This particular one is near Callow, and other typical single species ones would be for stinking hellebore. We've got one site which has got leopard bane, which apparently goes back, we thought it was an introduction, but apparently it goes back a lot further than we thought. So it will be staying as an RVNR. We won't be taking that off yet as an introduction. And the management of these sites will depend very much on the species that is growing. But on the whole, it's quite a light touch. So you're just trying to make sure that you've got nothing else that is competing with your target species, nothing else that's going to be shading it out. Now, some of our sites are really quite challenging. This one where Anne is walking, must have been in the early days because she hasn't got her high vis on yet, is Stretford Bridge, and it's a notorious accident cluster site. And we discovered, from talking to Balfour Beatty, that there are over 360 accident hotspots now in the county. So the important thing here is that the forward visibility is good. So this is one which we definitely can't manage. Similarly, you've got some sites which are very steep, like this bank. It's a quarry face at Home Lacey, just opposite the Home Lacey Bridge. Fortunately, that doesn't need much management because it's practically on rock. And then you've also got sites like this on a country road at a bend where really it wouldn't be safe to work. So these sorts of sites, particularly where there is the risk of where they're already known as accident hotspots, or they're steep and inaccessible, in talking to Balfour Beatty, they have BBLP, they have offered to help with their staff volunteer days in autumn. So we're very much hoping that does happen this year. So I'm going to quickly take you through some examples of some of these are new RVNRs, because what we're trying to do, I don't know to what extent I've said that, I'm sorry, I'm just stepping back a moment. So it was said that some of our sites are steep and inaccessible, and so we need external help. But where the verges are nice and wide, where they're on quieter roads, then this is where we can work with volunteers, and we rely very heavily on our network of volunteers, and make sure that they get the management. They're also almost micromanagement, but that autumn cut, as you can see here, very important, and everybody with their rakes. And here, what's also, good to flag up is that, yeah, I probably should backtrack a moment just to explain. On our designated RVNRs, what we've done is put in place wherever possible anyway, a verge guardian. So there's somebody who will keep an eye on the verge, and in some cases they will also organise a little group of volunteers. And that's certainly what happens in this case. You may recognise some faces here. This is over in the near the Olcan Valley, in the parish of Llanfaino. This one is a particularly long verge where we've got 3-4 farmers who are on board with us. And where there's a long verge like this, it's great if they can do the cutting and help us with collecting the cuttings, as is happening here. And also they've often got a corner of a field where a heap of arisings can go. This one over here is a new RVNR it's in the parish of Madley at Bage Mill. So I mentioned Verge Guardians, I mentioned our network of volunteers, the importance of cutting and raking. We're hoping to get more local farmers on board. And another tool in our toolbox, as it were, is Suzanne has now acquired a tiny Italian power scythe called Mow. And so that's really helping where we need to mow, where there are nice wide flat verges, we can use that. Okay, well, it's really important at this point to flag up the importance of our partners. They're all on this sign, but let me just explain. So very, very quickly, I suppose we became aware that we would need professional help. None of us is a qualified ecologist. All three of us are still working, and so we looked for support from established conservation bodies. So here are our partners. We're affiliated to, can we see them? Yeah, we're affiliated. So although we're an independent group and we want to stay independent, nimble of foot, etc., we are really quite reliant on the Wildlife Trust and indebted to them for the support they've given us in terms of insurance. So we've got insurance cover for our volunteers working on the safe verges, for health and safety training, for risk assessments, that sort of thing, for help with funding applications, and also what has proved invaluable is help with publicity and social media. I mentioned Plantlife. Obviously, we are looking to Plantlife. They updated their guidelines back in the management guidelines in September 2019. So we're also looking to Plantlife for advice, and we've built up a good relationship with Kate Petty, who has been the Verges officer there for some years now. You will see, very importantly here, Balfour Beatty acting on behalf of contractors for Herefordshire Council. And we had a very lucky break last year and were able to get these signs with collaboration from Balfour Beatty. We got these signs in place before the verge cutting took place in May. and that was very much with their agreement, and they supplied the stakes and suggested that we put nice big arrows on the road, as well as a sign at each end of the verge to make sure that the contractors saw it and didn't mow it inadvertently. Other partners, a very early partner, Herefordshire Meadows, Caroline Hanks, Sue Holland and Company, and the two AONBs, which I always stumble over, Paul Esrich, Malvern Hills, and Nick Critchley, the Wye Valley ANOB. And we've also been working with parish councils, and probably need to do a little bit more work with parish councils, because we were piggybacking a little bit on the work that a previous Balfour Beatty stakeholder manager had been doing in encouraging some parishes to not do a spring cut. So certainly we piggybacked a little bit on that, but yes, so we have been working with them. And last but not least, Friends of the Earth, the Herefordshire branch of Friends of the Earth, who helped to fund, well, they funded our signs when we realised during lockdown that actually printers were still working. They very much came to our rescue and gave us a lovely donation, which made sure we could get these signs printed and up in place, with help obviously of Verge Guardians and volunteers. Is there anybody I have forgotten there? Well, yeah, just to mention, we're also we've also come across some very supportive councillors, Herefordshire councillors, ward councillors, and we're also working closely with he's the county recorder, Stuart Headley. So that's, you know, we've got plenty of places where we can get good advice, because we know we're not necessarily the experts ourselves. So these are the slides that I'm going to go through quite quickly, because here are some examples of relatively new verges. Sorry, when I say verges, I mean RVNRs. This one, quite unusual, it's a brownfield site. It's down on a very small industrial estate on the outskirts of Ross-on-Wye. And because the soil is very nutrient poor, there's fantastic range of bee orchids, pyramidal orchids, as well as common spotted and lots of other flora. And we have been allowed to do a little bit of management of some of these mainly ornamental shrubs, but they're pretty much looking after themselves. So a little bit of management every year, but because the soil is so poor, they're not going to be taken over, it were. There's not lots of competition for them. And I should also say, one of our aims, I didn't really emphasize that, is for us to add new RVNRs to get as many special roadside verges designated as possible. In neighbouring Gloucestershire, for example, they have well over 90, and some counties are looking at, you know, hundreds. So we've got a long way to go. So this is a typical example of an unclassified road. This particular one is in the Golden Valley at Newton St Margaret, but one of our supporters has also sent in similar examples, a very narrow verge on a bend. Admittedly, the hedge has been taken out and replaced with park fencing, but you've got this remnant, lovely remnant bit of meadow. And yes, the ones that were sent in by a supporter were in the Langaran area, but I'm sure there are other areas of Herefordshire where this is also, where you also get these sorts of examples. This is the Beige Mill RVNR that I mentioned earlier, in the parish of Madley. Lovely site for common spotted orchids. Had become very overgrown. If anything, it's gone the other way because the farmer has suddenly taken charge and the hedgerow at the back has suddenly become very, very short. But something I should have mentioned perhaps is that where the verge is wide enough, we are I'm hoping I'm going to not confuse messages here. We are looking where possible for some structural diversity. So you might have an area of very short grass, for example, it's that 1 meter swathe, which needs to be cut for forward visibility for safety reasons, for example, and then an area which is cut just once a year, and then back towards the hedgerow, probably only cut that, on rotation every 2 or 3 years. So you get that diversity of structure, some long, some short. Just that diversity obviously is very positive where the verge allows it. Obviously not all verges do. And this particular one is one that two friends have been, both of them professional ecologists, I should say, have been trying to persuade Herefordshire Council, i.e. Balfour Beatty, to manage more sensitively for a number of years. And finally, this year it happened. This is at Old Gore. It's on the I call it the Muchmarkle Ross Road as you go through some woodland, and it's a lovely wide area, notable for its orchids, but also because there are damper areas, you get some lovely late flowering species like Devil's Bit scabious and wild angelica. And Anne and I were able to picnic there late in the autumn. It really is a lovely site. On this one, we left the 2 signs, do not cut yet signs, in place. We were intending to do the management ourselves, including the cutting. So where there are late flowering species, obviously we wouldn't want those cut unless it's absolutely necessary before time. So Devil's Bit scabious typically doesn't flower until late August, even into September. And this is the Broadmoor Common Verge that I mentioned earlier. It is a lovely limestone bank. It gets called limestone bank. Some quite unusual species, including grass vetchling, very difficult to photograph, pink. That's wild, some wild basil, which is quite commonplace on these special verges, and common rock rose. But also some lovely species which you cannot see because we have a bit of a challenge at this site with a local farmer who insists on mowing it, even when the sign was in place. The sign was really put up for Balfour Beatty, but it it was put up for for the public generally, and so he insists on cutting quite a large swathe of it, where we know we have wild thyme, we have mouse ear hawksweed, all really short species because it's limestone. So you're not going to get big rambling species of grass. It's not going to be overtaken. So we've got a little bit of work to do on this one with a locality steward to see whether it be possible, if safety is really an issue here, then to have a mirror the other side of the road. And it's a difficult site at the moment because it's become very, very busy because of the Fownhope Road being closed. Sorry, you didn't really need to know that, but just as we were saying, it's not just all about flowers. One of the fascinations is also with the invertebrates that we find. Just some examples here. I always want to call this the ghost spider, but it's a little crab spider, a common blue butterfly on creeping thistle, burnet moths on, that's greater bird's-foot trefoil, and a small white on wild basil. Just very quickly though. I mean, our expertise isn't necessarily in invertebrates. I'm a bit of a moth person, but this is an area where we'd love some help in surveying for insects. So here we have a flower beetle on hawkweed. We have some emerging. You can see the pouch that one is coming out of. Some emerging burnet moths, and on the common ragwort, which unfortunately still gets sprayed, even if it's a long way from livestock. Some cinnabar moth caterpillars, once a very, very common sight, and a lovely close-up of a hoverfly on oxeye daisy. So I need to speed up a little bit. Just moving really to the future. So this slide is focusing on some of the collaboration that we've had with Balfour Beatty. We've had 2 meetings with them, with the stakeholder manager, with a couple of senior managers, and also with somebody, with an officer from Herefordshire Council. We had one very, very recently. So already Balfour Beatty had identified 3 areas for sowing wildflower seeds. And this one is, you might recognise Roman Road. There was another site at the bottom of Aylstone Hill, and over here at on the Rotherwas Relief Road. And there hadn't been any preparation of these sites, so they hadn't been scarified. There hadn't been a regime of cutting and collecting before. And we suspect a lot of the species we were seeing on the Roman Road were already there, because what we did find were a few alien species which would come in with the wildflower seed that had been sown. Obviously, we don't want those. So just purely by managing this site, the Roman Road, it's already a great site for wildflowers. This is a view of it. You can see ladies' bed straw and common knapweed. And we also so the agreement was that we would survey these wildflower sites and report on what we had found, and also give recommendations to Balfour Beatty as to, you know, whether they should extend them and how they should go about that. So that has been done. And when we were surveying the Roman Road, what we found was an amazing area, colony of bee orchids even, as well as a few common spotted ones, which was just slightly hidden. But you know, we would only have known by walking, by actually surveying to see what was there. On the subject of Roman Road and the Rotherwas Relief Road, we've identified these 2 roads as possible flagship projects. You know, we would love to see, just with a little bit of tweaking of management. Already there's been a huge reduction in number of cuts here. With just a little bit of tweaking, then this could be really a fantastic site for wildflowers. And obviously very good visibility as well, so that's ideal. Perhaps Rotherwas Road a little less so, but the Rotherwas ribbon, we're also, that's probably a little bit further down the priority list, but certainly we're very keen to see some work done on that. The problem here is that it really does need cutting and collecting machinery, because it's a bank here. Some areas are flatter further along when you get to Watery Lane, but here it really needs what's it called, a mounted an arm flail. Was there anything else? Yes, one of the other things that came out of our meeting, which I'll pick up on in a minute, but just in terms of future aspirations, certainly we're hoping that Balfour Beatty trial a system of removing topsoil at some accident hotspots, junctions, for example, reducing that fertility, and then sowing with very low growing wildflower seed. So I'll come back onto that in a moment, because it's also a way of reducing management costs, the management burden over time. And there's a link to that with Dr. Phil Sterling. And we're also very keen to start supporting amenity verge projects, green space projects in Hereford, which Suzanne will be talking about a little bit more. Just touching now on verges in general. Back in, so we consulted first of all with our partners, so Wildlife Trust, the AONBs, Plantlife, etc., to put together a proposal to really change the way, or to at least influence change in the way that verges generally throughout Herefordshire are managed. And that was done in November 2019 and sent to all of the councillors, all of the ward councillors, and we received a lot of positive messages, of support. And in a nutshell, that is saying, please protect RVNRs from a spring cut, and that we've largely succeeded in doing through collaborating with Balfour Beatty. Change the time of cutting countrywide. What we'd like to see is an earlier cut, avoiding that first cut being just as wildflowers come into flower in April, May, bringing that forward a little bit, with the exception of those verges where obviously there are spring flowering species in abundance. Cutting and collecting where possible, that really is a gold standard, but at the moment that looks a little bit difficult because it does require machinery, although Balfour Beatty do have some machinery already for pitch and putt and school playgrounds and things like school greens and things like that. And so cutting and collecting where possible, and a full width autumn cut so making sure that it's not just that 1 metre swathe that gets cut, but the whole of the verge gets cut. I mean, sometimes that's happening through farmers doing their hedges. And again, Suzanne will pick up on this. Yellow rattle you may already know as the meadow maker, but I won't dwell on that. That is another useful bit of kit in the toolbox for reducing fertility. Removing topsoil to reduce fertility. I mentioned the trials that are going to be taking place, or we hope they are. And another of our overriding messages was to restore county ecologist responsibility for verges and RVNRs, and we know that that message has already chimed with certainly the climate change group, and has already been taken on board to a large extent, and we were able to facilitate a meeting with Phil Sterling. Some of you may have heard me mention Phil Sterling before, who has vast experience of particularly the Weybridge Relief Road, but vast experience as county ecologist in Dorset, putting into practice a lot of the things that we've been saying, but the emphasis very much on fertility reduction. So this is really what makes it all worthwhile for us. Just a little bit of a couple of, well, 3 credits here to Archie Miles, who is one of our Verge guardians and took the greater knapweed shot, and Lady's bedstraw and the field scabious, all on one of our Stoke Lacey RVNR. And these shots have all been taken on Orcid Bank because it's calcareous. You've got some lovely species like yellowwort, common centaury, which we saw earlier, and one which I absolutely love. It's fantastically sculptural, the woolly thistle, and a great favourite as well with common carder bees. Because although, you know, we see ourselves, I didn't mention our role, we see ourselves primarily as helping to coordinate a little hub, a gateway, building relationships, you know, trying to make things joined up. We still want to be as involved in the practical stuff and getting out on the verges. That's what we love. And just 2 shots to finish up on. This one, the credit is to Ian Draycott, and I need what it says in front of me, because this is a rare spurge bug. It was found on one of the new RVNRs in the Doward, and it's an example apparently of a Dicranocephus medius. And this shot is of a woodwhite, which you probably know is not a common butterfly at all. There is a stronghold in Hoffwood. This is on Orcid Bank, just down from Hoffwood on the way to Mordiford. And it just goes to show what potential species-rich verges have to act as stepping stones for dispersal and to play a real role as as corridors in ecological connectivity. So I'm going to finish there and hand over to Suzanne. Let me just I wasn't going to stop sharing. I don't know whether Suzanne can be activated, how that might work.
No, you carry on, Sally, and I'll say when I need you to change the slide.
Okay, great, you're there, good.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I know that as a group there are a number of people who are interested in creating new patches of wildflower meadow, and a lot of our verges we just regard as mini meadows. I have some background in meadow creation from my work with Plantlife. And if anybody is interested afterwards, you can use our email address and contact us for a couple of sheets of information to remind you of how to go about it if you want to create an area of meadow, whether that's on a verge or whether it's in a parkland or somewhere else. First job is always to understand what you've got already. Survey your patch. We don't want anybody stripping off the turf of an area which has already got great botanical interest. So if you need help with that, there are plenty of people around to ask, including ourselves, but it is important to understand what's already there when you want to create a meadow. Could we have the next slide, Sally? And then you need to source your seed. This is a typical wildflower meadow seed mix. It has a sort of a muesli consistency. There are lots of different grasses and flower seeds in there, from the large seeds like a grimony right down to the fine dust of the common spotted orchid. The seed source would ideally be something local. It would have to be from a meadow of a similar soil type, and if you're not able to source local seed, there are some very good places you can go to get different seed mixes. One of those that we often recommend is Emma's Gate, where you have a variety of mixes and soil types to choose from. Getting that seed source right is important. And the sowing time for this seed is always in the autumn. The most important seed in there that needs to be sowed in the autumn is the yellow rattle. And I'll come to that in a moment. But that's one of the seeds that needs cold stratification. So if you sow it in the spring, it won't grow. The next job, Sally, is to prepare the ground. There are two routes that you can take. If you've already got a grassland and you want to add seed into the grassland, you can leave the grass there and you can scarify and make lots and lots of pockets of bare soil. It really needs to be a third bare soil to 2/3 of your remaining grass, and then sow into your pockets. If you're able to strip off the turf or dig over the ground and get rid of all the weeds and start from a bare soil, then you get a quicker result. And as long as you haven't got a huge weed seed bank, you get a better result within a few years. If your field or your patch of ground is full of docks, then your meadow is going to be full of docks, and you're going to spend a lot of time digging out docks. So the preparation is important, and it's worth getting right and getting your ground ready for autumn sowing. The more you can remove fertility before you start, the better your result. So turf stripping or removing topsoil is always very helpful. Wildflower meadows love a poor soil. If you've got too much fertility there, then you're going to get very, very dense growth, more weeds and more problems. Next one, Sally. So these are the plants which are important as your meadow makers. On the left is yellow rattle. In the middle is eyebright, and on the right is red Bartsia. The yellow rattle you've probably all heard of as a hemiparasitic plant. These plants all do the same job in a meadow. They're all members of the same plant family, the Scrophulariaceae, and they all do this job of attaching underground to the roots of the grasses. It's mainly grasses that they attach to, and they extract a whole lot of nutrient from the grasses, which means that your grasses are more sparse, they're less tall, they're less dense, and they're far less competition for all of the flowering species that are the ones you want to encourage. On the lowlands and on the clay soils in Herefordshire, you're most likely to be seeing the yellow rattle. But once you get up into uplands, Golden Valley area and wetter areas in general, then you're more likely to see the eyebright, either instead or as well as the yellow rattle. And the red Bartsia crops up, well, here and there really, often on the more calcareous sites. But they're all useful plants for helping get that meadow established, and they're all doing the same job. Next one, Sally. Now this is a patch which is on the Hampton Bishop Road, and we have to thank Annette Bilson and Martin Peters for this. This is an area near to Key Close, which has been turned into a wildflower meadow with the addition of some extra seed and a change in management. This is just its first year and it's been hugely successful, and this is an example of what you can do. The things that they've done absolutely right with this patch are firstly the consultation that they've done. They've consulted with local people and with their local councillor and with Balfour Beatty and with us for advice on how to go about things. They've sown the right seed at the right time of year, and they've cut paths and edges through the meadow, which makes the meadow look cared for and less of a mess for those inevitable people that are going to complain about messy grass. And what they've managed here has been tremendously successful. If we go to the next slide, Sally. These are some of Annette's pictures of the wildlife that they've seen and spotted and managed to attract just in their first year of restoring this patch of grassland, which I think is tremendously impressive. We're happy to help anybody who wants to do a similar project in Hereford or anywhere else in the county. We're happy to come out and survey for you, give you advice on seed sources and so on, and management plans. And there is all kinds of other ways in which you might be able to help us with our project. We'd be very happy for everybody to contact us and sign up to our supporters list if you haven't already. And we would love to hear from you about any other good verges in the county, which we should be out there surveying and looking at and possibly protecting. And anybody who would like to join us and help us with our physical work out on the verges, or with our office work, which is always overwhelming, please do contact us, and I'm sure we can find you something helpful to do. If you just go to the next slide, Sally, there's our contact details. So you can ask us for our meadow sowing advice, or you can offer your help there. And I think that's all I had to say.
Right.
Well, we
Well,
go to questions now.
yeah, we can go to questions. Thank you. Before we do, can I just, I don't think we've introduced Anne to everybody. So Anne Crane, can you put up your hand so we know that you are the other member of the Verging on the Wild group? So questions can also be directed at you. There are a few questions, and let's see. I think what I'll do is relay them myself to start with, because we have so many people. I can't get everybody up on the screen at the same time. So Christina is to everybody, well to you three really, or have you had any contact or success with Wigmore Parish Hall?
Parish Council.
Sorry, Parish Council.
We have a local group of enthusiastic helpers in the Wigmore area. There is an Aimstree Wildlife Trust group, and we have some members from there, and one or two other people in the Wigmore area who are interested in their verges and are doing some work and who are out there helping. I'm not sure if the Parish Council has actually been in touch with us. Do you remember that, Anne?
I don't, to be honest. It's some while since we had any contact with them. If so, I'll just have a quick look while another question comes in.
But
we do have sorry, Suzanne, I'm going to interrupt you for a minute. We do have a little message, which is the clerk from Wigmore is here.
Oh, lovely.
This evening. So perhaps they could identify themselves and maybe come in on this particular issue. And also if the original Christina, if she wants to unmute herself, if she has anything she wants to ask further. So can we have?
Yeah. I'd be interested. Oh, sorry.
Wigmore was one of the parishes that we thought had asked for no spring cut. But we don't know whether that actually did happen or not, because it didn't come on the list that we were given by the stakeholder manager at Balfour Beatty. We only had 11 parishes on there, and Wigmore wasn't one of them. So whether it was just... Could I
respond for Wigmore?
Yes. Yes,
please. Thank you. They were on the list, but when the stakeholder at Balfour Beatty left, their name was left off the list when it was handed on. And the Parish Council was in touch with Herefordshire Council last summer, complaining that the verges had been done, and we are about to write again to make sure that we're on the list for this year for no cut. So they were on the list, as was Aimstree. I'm clerk to both.
Okay. Oh, that's really helpful to know.
Not
We thought that was the case, but there was a bit of a hiatus between one locality steward leaving and another being appointed. It's about 3 months. And I think a lot of things got lost in that time.
Yeah.
Anne, can I interject? There's a comment from Sue Parkinson at Welsh Newton.
Yep.
About some work that she's been doing. I think possibly Suzanne has given the contact details that may or may not answer Sue's question, but she's saying that what's the next step for managing the verges that she's surveyed. I don't know.
Yes, get in touch with us and let us know where they are and what you found. Yes.
But it could be important to note there that we have got an arrangement with Balfour Beatty whereby we let them know the location of verges that we've been to see and surveyed, and we think will qualify as RVNRs, and that's probably the best route of guaranteeing that they're not going to get accidentally mown by their contractor, because we will give them the location and the coordinates, and hopefully that will offer that protection to stop them being cut in the spring or the early summer.
So
Plus,
Sue should get in touch with you with her
Yes.
findings.
Yes, please do. Yes.
Okie doke. Tony Fagan to everybody. Many people from the south side of the county ask about gateway projects. In this instance, Rotherwas roundabout. Has anyone been in touch about this? And is it possible to come up with a project with Highways England who are supportive?
it's one of the projects we've identified as a flagship project. Certainly the Relief Road, which would incorporate the roundabout. But I suppose we saw the lack of cutting and collecting machinery for the steep bank as a bit of a stumbling block. But nevertheless, it is there. It's certainly on the agenda. So if there are other people who are like-minded, then please get in touch.
Yes, there are parts of the road which are quite flat, and that roundabout area is quite flat and has some great flowers on it already. So that's an area that we might be able to work with, even if we can't manage the steep banks at the moment.
Does Tony want to come back with any comment on that? I don't know where you are.
Here I am. Yeah, thanks for that. I think, I mean, I am a ward councillor south of Hereford, but not actually in that particular area. So I think what I'll do is I'll get in touch with the ward councillor for that area and see if he can sort of encourage some people to sort of be supportive. I know Highways England are very supportive of it, but they need the other partners. They need Balfour Beatty and obviously community sector partners make any sort of work that they do much more valuable. So I'll keep, but if anybody does get in touch about it, if you could sort of point them in my direction, that would be great. Thanks.
Yes, it's something that we're on already. Yeah.
Yes, there's a part, sorry, there is also a part of it which is managed by almost privately, I suppose, by the Rotherwas estate. And so we're hoping to influence them as well, possibly through friends of the Rotherwas estate. So there are various avenues in, I think.
There's a question from Jenny Hewitt.
Yep.
Who's concerned about the nutrient-rich runoff from topsoil from fields, and the RVNRs are possibly victims. And she asks, how do you manage that situation of controlling the nutrient-rich runoff?
Well,
I think there's very little we can do about that, to be honest. If we can find the landowner, we can speak to them about it. I can't think of any instances where that has happened so far, but we would try and speak to the landowner if that arose.
and any of the verges that are micromanaged, as Sally's been describing, would be cut and the arisings collected anyway, which would be a way of keeping the fertility down. You know, so that's going to help. But the problem of runoff in general, that's a huge question.
Yes. There's an Opal Pritchard question, Anne.
Yeah.
One?
Giles Blackmore is chair of Opal Pritchard. I have a pet project to plant trees along the A465. We have a couple of verges. It would be good to have advice on what seeds, etc., for a wild verge. However, one of the verges is currently a bramble thicket. Should we clear that out for short-term gain? Some of my councillors are farmers, so we have access to the usual farm machinery. The other is just a monoculture of grass. Who would like to take that one on?
Was this an A road?
Yeah,
it's the A465. It's I'm just concerned that brambles obviously give a lot of stuff to wildlife. So should we just get rid of it all, put the trees in and put in some seeds, and then maybe let some of the brambles grow again?
I mean, first of all, have you had any contact with Balfour about this?
Yeah, we've had some contact. We've put in an application to adopt basically those chunks of land. It took 2 years to adopt a roundabout, so this is a long-term project. So we're just finding out where all the utilities are underneath the trees, obviously the roots. I've got all of the details from the Woodland Trust for the trees and everything like that, but it's basically what's going to go underneath it, because obviously trees will mean that you can't mow it in the normal way. So what's
the trees are great. The trees will shade out any meadow plants that are growing underneath, because they all need good sunshine. So as the trees grow, you're going to get fewer and fewer flowering plants underneath. If you want to do a grassland area, then do that separately from the trees. Don't try to integrate the two.
Okay, that's great, because there's a couple of areas that we decided weren't really appropriate for trees, so we could then, put stuff in there. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be fine. I'm happy to come out and look at it with you. It's not far from me. I'm at Tarrington. Happy to come out and walk the length of it with you and help you with what's going to go where.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
That was a good idea from Diana to invite the ward councillor too. Sorry, Anne.
I'm just looking here. Jan Malcolmson is basically saying Pipe Aston is definitely interested in the project. So that prompts me to think I will make a record of the chat, so comments like that can be passed on to you.
That's great, thank you. Yes, anybody who's interested in what we're doing can contact us on that email address we put up, and we'll return.
There's a question from Sarah, who's a new councillor in Kinnersley Parish, and she asks, can you give me some advice on how to persuade other PC members, Parish Council members, on the 1 cut per year policy? We have 3 HWT nature reserves in our parish, and it would be fantastic to link them into a network of verges as corridors for wildlife. Any suggestions, please? I don't know where Sarah is, but
would you like to speak?
Sarah, are you out there? What page are you on?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Now.
Hello there. Yes, I'm very keen to. We've got 3 fantastic nature reserves here. One is the Sturts Nature Reserve, and then we've got the Ernley Gilbert Meadow, and we also have the Davis Meadows, 2 of which are really species rich. They've got fantastic, they're already established wildflower meadows with orchids and lots of other species of flora and fauna. But, you know, I'm just very keen to kind of try and get some sort of connectivity with Verges around here to try and just get sort of wildlife corridors between sort of some of these reserves, and just some advice really on, I mean, the areas we have are we're on a sort of floodplain here, so the areas we have, we're at the bottom of sort of quite deep hills, and the areas we have, we need, I think, to really try and get some of the nutrient rich soil taken back and to develop these areas with wildflowers, and really just to see, you know, what you would advise as a way going forward to create these corridors. I mean, I would really appreciate maybe someone coming to have a look at what we've got and to see the best way going forward, because obviously a lot of the species we have, like damper areas, yeah. That's it.
Well,
really.
I know those reserves. I've worked on them as a
Okay.
Wildlife Trust
Great.
volunteer for years.
Yeah,
and I'm sure that we could work alongside you and the Wildlife Trust to get something done on those. What would be ideal is if we can arrange some turf stripping, and then have the Wildlife Trust harvest some seed off of those meadows, which we can then sow. So I think if we work with the trust on it, I think you could end up with some great seed, which would be very appropriate for your local conditions.
Oh, well, that would be fantastic.
They have a seed harvester, and you know, they may well be happy to do that.
Yeah, well, I know that they harvested some seed from the Only Gilbert Meadow last year, or 2020. So that would be fantastic. So well, I'll drop you an email.
Well, yes, well, if you talk to us about it, and we'll all talk to Andrew at the Wildlife Trust as well, then we'll see what we can do.
That's fine. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. That's brilliant.
This just gives me the opportunity just quickly to mention, now that you mentioned the Wildlife Trust and Andrew, that we have a Zoom talk next month, which Andrew is giving, and it is about the Nature Recovery Network. So hopefully he would be also covering some of the things that are concerning you as well, about creating corridors and networks.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
I'd also like to interject that if you want to get support from your parish council, make sure that you've got the clerk on your side and that you have people turning up at your meetings, whether they're on Zoom or otherwise, and asking for this sort of information, because then that will persuade the other parish councillors to support your proposals.
Okay.
And as I said, I'm speaking as a chairman of a parish council, so that's the way to get through them, and then the parish clerk will then get on to Balfour Beatty and persuade them to get involved as well.
That's really interesting, because I've been trying to get hold of Balfour Beatty. I've rung and I've delivered emails, and no one will get back to me on, because what I was suggesting is that we sort of have to, as you've been doing, kind of no cut areas. So because last year the parish council decided that they wanted the areas, I've only been a parish councillor for about 2 months, so they decided they wanted to have a 2-cut policy last year. So I've been trying to interject that this year they only have a 1-cut policy in certain areas, and I can't get hold of anyone who's prepared to have a conversation with me.
Well, there should be somebody. There should be well, your locality steward, but also the stakeholder manager is the person who interfaces with the parishes, and for each, yes, it's divided into regions, and each one has a locality steward.
Get the clerk to talk to the locality steward. That's the best way, because they pay attention to the chairman and the locality the parish clerks, because that's the way to do it.
Okay, we have a problem at the moment. We're actually between parish clerks, so we are without a clerk.
I feel your pain. I know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think
thank you so much. Yeah, we've been very, very helpful. Thank you.
Nick, do you want to get on to the next question, which is one about schools, I believe?
I'm just replying to Sue Parkinson. I could.
Okay, I'll do it then.
I could, because of having a background in schools, I could say something about that.
Yeah, well, so we've got a question from Beth. Do you want to pick up on it?
Yes, I mean, it does. The BOW team can say more, but I would say that there are quite a lot of hoops to jump through with getting children involved. For instance, anybody involved in supervising them has to have a CRB check. And also at the moment, the poor little things are under desperate pressure for this, what I think is ludicrous catch-up agenda. But it would be wonderful to see them spending time outdoors doing this sort of thing, rather than stuck in the classroom revising for exams and SATs. So there is an opportunity, I think, but I don't know how much engagement VOW have got already. Any thoughts?
We don't envisage having children working out on the roadsides.
No, I think this was more, they were talking about transitioning concrete playgrounds into wildlife friendly green spaces.
Yeah, any other spaces which are not by the roadside, yeah, we'd be very happy to be involved, yeah. Okay, so Beth, that's, I'm not sure where you are, but if you want to get in touch with Verging on the Wild, they might, you might have a good collaboration. Okay, next one. Okay. This is Maggie, who asks, have you supported urban meadow creation with problems of litter and dog walking? Have you supported, I think she, or have you supported urban meadow creation with problems of litter and dog walking? Could you, Maggie, wherever you are, could you clarify this question? Because I'm not quite sure. Is she here? Okay. Anyway, oh, sorry.
You can't speak.
She says she can't speak.
Oh, right.
Yeah, we know which Maggie that is. So,
well, yes, I think litter and dogs are ubiquitous, aren't they? We have to do a litter pick every time we venture onto a verge, and the same would apply to parklands. Well, you just do your best to work around it, to work with it.
I think framing and putting in a path, mowing a path helps, because it's sort of enticing dog owners to just walk in those areas rather than right through. So
okay, there's Jeremy Milne is asking, and Jeremy, if you want to unmute yourself in case you want to follow up. Sally, what potential do you see in working with the conservation charity God's Acre as a partner organization in view of the linkages that their sites, with their sites and objectives in the county?
I think there is potential there. I know actually Herefordshire Meadow, Sue Holland was also talking about that. And at one point there was a talk of all getting together, which lockdown has obviously put paid to. Yeah, I mean, they have very similar aims to us. So, and certainly on a personal level, I'm also involved in helping to manage our churchyard in a more wildlife friendly way. And campaigning for a long time for that, and finally seeing some results. But that initial work was actually done by Caring for God's Acre. The original research was done by them and then shelved, I have to say, until we retrieved it. But yeah, definitely some potential there.
Okay. Nick, do you want to go on to the next one?
Yes, we've got, I mean, Brian Hurrell, Chair of the Trustees, says, just want to thank you for all the inspiring work you're doing at VOW and for the collaboration with so many NGOs. Maggie says she's thinking of Villa Green and a patch at Belmont is what she's thinking of there. Yep. Brian says thank you to the City Branch for tonight's enjoyable session. And then I think there was another one I spotted. No, no, I think that's pretty much up to date. Diana Toynbee advises everyone to pester their ward councillor. Jenny Hewitt agrees about children and catch up. They're very stressed as it is. Beth's going to follow things up.
Yeah.
And also I note that we've got, Susanna's put the contact details in, so they'll be in the chat, which will be saved, and people can access that later. So as well as the slide, it's also in the chat. We've got some new messages, Anne. Do you want to have a look at them?
I think that's all. Most of it is just thank yous. And so yeah, I think we can wrap it up there.
I did just see something on the role of the Verge Guardian, I think.
Ah,
Yes.
And
yes, you're
asking
right.
about that, I
Nigel.
don't know whether Suzanne
No,
or Anne would
yes.
like to reply, but certainly, so what do they do potentially? Obviously, people who are interested in a local special verge, and potentially can organise volunteers. Will keep an eye on it to make sure that it isn't getting mown when it shouldn't be, and helping by putting up do not cut signs, which we'll be doing again this year. I didn't make very much of those, but the do not cut yet signs at either end of the special verge, the Roadside Verge Nature Reserve, and storing them. And also benefiting, we're hoping to, we're doing a funding application at the moment, and we are hoping to get some training, some funding for training, which would help those people who don't necessarily know an awful lot about wildflower ID or other areas of ID, grasses and sedges as well, to benefit from that. I don't know whether Suzanne or Anne wanted to add anything there, whether I've covered everything.
Yeah, you've covered that. Yeah.
There's somebody was asking about licenses, and Giles has replied with you need to talk to the Balfour Beatty with regard to wildlife WRT licenses.
WRT.
Do you want to? It's not something I know anything about.
With regard to.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, they when you're looking after verges that you don't own, you need to talk with them about what you're up to and all the insurances and everything like that. Something I've learned the hard way with taking on a roundabout and doing the ideas about the trees and everything like that. So it's just paperwork. It shouldn't be a problem. You've also got to think about insurance, as somebody else has said, you know, about the high-vis jackets and not having kids on the side of the roads and stuff like that. It's paperwork, thinking about stuff, and yeah, it's all possible.
And do you have anything to add, Sally, Suzanne or Anne, to that?
I would just add that we have found Balfour Beatty generally very receptive. Where there are barriers seems to be more to do with funding and resourcing than anything else. But we're definitely coming across a different, even in the years, the 2-3 years now that we've been going, there has been a change.
Yeah. In terms of insurance, I mean, we are covered by the Herefordshire Wildlife Trust insurance for our work parties. Obviously, as long as we do risk assessments and everybody is fully, you know, cognizant of the rules. So that's something that what we probably would do initially is when we help to set up teams of volunteers for the RVNRs, one of us would come out to work with them, and that covers us from the insurance point of view and the risk assessment. But when groups set up and become more autonomous, we'd have to look at that and whether they would need to get their own insurance. I mean, I don't know if either of you have got a better idea about that, but
I think you'll also find that if you talk to your parish council and get them involved, they will have public insurance that will probably cover you.
Right.
Great. One last question then, which is from Beth. Oh, we have another one. Well, she asked, do you have any social media platforms that they can follow?
Hmm.
No.
Not really. We're far too busy for that. We rely very much on the Wildlife Trust for putting up occasional posts about what we're doing, and we have a page on their website. If you look at the Wildlife Trust's projects page, there's a page about us there, and they will post on Facebook and so on about our activities.
There
We
is.
also, sorry, Anne.
If anyone would love to do that side of things, we'd be more than happy to hear from you, because none of us have got the wherewithal or the information to do so.
I would just say on that Anderley Hill is encouraging volunteers to start a blog. So if there is a new volunteer for VOW who wants to do that, then get in touch with Anderley. But the information on the tab, I'm just looking at it when I saw that question. You go to the Trust website and go to the Projects tab, and there's a drop-down menu, and there is a lot of information on there about Verging on the Wild. Whether that would constitute social media, I don't know, but there's a lot of information.
Yeah, it's a good link. It's a good link.
We know it's a gap, but we do need help.
This is just a very quick question, which is, I think we're going to have to wrap up, but would insurance be covered under the Lengthsman scheme? I'm not sure if anybody knows the answer to this.
I know Lensmen are covered by parish councils, so parish councils sign up for a Lensman scheme, and that then is overseen by the stakeholder manager, Paul Hunter.
Okay, yes, and Giles came in on that. If anybody...
Yeah, I've just commented.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically you've got to check with parish council. I certainly checked on our insurance previously when we were erecting a bus shelter. So most parish councils should be covered, but always check with them.
Okay, I think this is a good time to end then. It's 8:30, and just left to say thank you to Sally, Suzanne and Anne for a brilliant presentation. I was just amazed how many places you've managed, how much you've managed to do in the last few years, and how many places you've been in the county. Pictures, photographs from lots of different parts, and also the combination of both really practical work and policy work. It's very impressive. So, and I hope that a lot of people have been inspired, and you'll have people sending you lots of emails, asking you questions, and most importantly, volunteering for all sorts of projects. Yes, Nick, do you want to add anything?
Just to thank everybody for the presentations, and for all the over 100 people who turned up, and lots of positive messages in the chat, which I must remember to say.